The town of Teu began preparations for celebration of being freed from the curse of the Lying Woods, or more accurately, though unbeknownst to them, the gathered shadow being destroyed and its hold on the townspeople removed. The party took some time to enjoy in the revelries before the final leg of their journey to the Cloud Spires. Mavis pulled Alcaeus to the side to speak with him about his abilities when he was a warlock, curious of his take on the so-called magic he wielded. Alcaeus tried his best to share what he could about his powers during his time as a warlock, but Mavis ultimately seemed to finally be settling on the fact that what people call magic is simply science that hasn't been explained yet, since Mavis clearly uses his own brain power and science to reproduce these so-called magical effects. May spent some time with Alcaeus' journal, specifically the final pages, and decided to speak with Alcaeus about it. May was particularly curious how Alcaeus was able to vanquish the darkness that had a hold on him, and Alcaeus said that it was more that the darkness abandoned him in a way, mostly out of malice, but much to Alcaeus' eventual gratitude. When Alcaeus expressed curiosity to May's questions, May simply said that even paladins of redemption have dark things they try to recover from. Zeus indulged in some of the local mead, and much to his surprise, Gar decided to indulge with him, while Laren spent some time enjoying simply dancing with some of the children at the party. Gar told Zeus and Laren of Bovrir the Hungry, Gar's father. Despite him gaining the nickname the Hungry, it wasn't anything sinister. Quite the opposite, in fact. He simply could eat. A lot. And was quite the prankster, apparently. Chasiana also indulged in quite a bit of alcohol, and was very forward with questions to the group, trying to get to know them. She shared a bit about herself and a little of what she knew of the journey ahead. Chasiana shared her surprise that Alcaeus was the warlock from before, much to Gar's utter shock, causing him to sternly saunter over to Alcaeus to demand justice. But after Alcaeus continued to express his genuine gratitude for the party's actions, and regret for his own, Gar decided that justice had already been served. And with that, the party rested for the evening. The party awoke the next morning with Chasiana waiting for them in the tavern, and the group wasted no time departing on the final leg of their journey toward the Cloud Spires. During the journey, Mavis asked Chasiana about the location of Sprocketon, reiterating that he needs to make it to the inventory before the 16th of Yamia, while he continued sketching designs for his invention for the event. Gar used sending to let Oliver know that Chasiana was alright, which Chasiana was thankful for, and Chasiana let slip that she and Oliver used to be an item, though not anymore. The group traveled for about 12 hours before setting up camp for the evening, and Gar took first watch. During his watch, Gar decided to take a sneak peek at Mavis's notebook to see if he could attempt to learn more about his companion in an attempt to understand him better. Gar ended up finding Mavis's miniature wind-up toy replicas of himself that explode, but he also found a miniature Gar replica, and a replica for everyone else in the party, though May's was unfinished. The only difference was that none of the replicas of the rest of the party had explosives on them. Gar decided to place his miniature in front of Mavis for him to find the next morning. Gar managed to also find Mavis's notebook, and found a rough sketch of what looked like a large mechanical suit of some sort, with gnomish scrawl scribbled throughout. Gar then returned the book where he found it and continued his watch. Eventually, the rest of the party awoke, with Mavis being the last to awaken, noticing his Gar replica staring him back in the face, and quickly placing it in his backpack. Mavis was very unwilling to discuss the miniatures, and was ready to depart immediately, so the party continued their journey. The party traveled for a full day, with tensions tangible enough to cut with a blade, but eventually rested for an evening before continuing the next day. After a few hours of travel the next morning, the party eventually continued on foot after the density of the forests and the rugged terrain of the foothills made it too difficult to continue by carriage. Mavis and Gar fell to the back of the group, and Gar expressed his apologies for going through Mavis's things, and that he simply wanted to understand him better. Mavis finally revealed that he made the miniatures because there are not many people that deserve to be immortalized, but that his group was some that do. Gar asked why the replicas of Mavis explode, insisting that he too must deserve to be immortalized, and Mavis simply said that his explosions are what will immortalize him, and that some inventions are built to last, while others are meant to go out with a boom. Gar and Mavis made peace with the situation, and the party continued on. Eventually, the group arrived at a small dead-end canyon, and Chasiana explained that they simply needed to disarm themselves of all their weapons and wait. After waiting for some time, eventually a monk arrived, saying nothing to the group, but after recognizing Chasiana, the monk guided them into a secluded crevice in the mountain, through a cave system with beautiful bioluminescent flora and flowing streams, eventually exiting the cave into a small secluded canyon between the mountains where a simple village resides. The village consisted primarily of small houses built on the ground level, while other houses were built into the sides of the mountain, connected by rope bridges that intersected at large spire-like boulders throughout the canyon. At the center of the canyon, Chasiana pointed out a stone statue representing cadence and cadenza, a single orb with its trailing tail traveling straight upward, with another orb and its trailing tail traveling upward in a circle around the central orb. Chasiana added that the center orb represents the strong, standalone instrument, perhaps a violin or a drum, while the outer orb represented the action piece, such as the bow of the violin or the stick for a drum. Chasiana reiterated that she wished she could play even a single note on the instrument in an attempt to have its power teach her about what happened in the First Age, the single biggest question of the world. Zeos contemplated if perhaps cadence and cadenza were spirits of people rather than instruments, but since there was no way to know for sure, this was only contemplation. The party met a leader of the village who introduced himself as Shenzu and immediately asked why the group was here. Zeos mentioned the memoriam the party held, but Shenzu had no reaction to the name. Through the conversation, the party managed to convince Shenzu that the party meant no harm, and he allowed them very guarded entry to a section of the village that had a statue resembling the memoriam. The party was led to the peak of one of the smaller spires surrounding them, where they saw a small pool of water, and on the other side of the pool stood a stone statue resembling the memoriam, with two beautiful cherry blossom trees on either side of the statue. While investigating the statue, May and Laren noticed a glowing symbol of the memoriam in the center of the pool, and Zeos proceeded to place the memoriam on the symbol. The memoriam began to glow with a soft blue light as it sank into the symbol. A bright light enveloped the party, and they suddenly found themselves in a small cave, without Chasiana. Several rays of light peeked through holes in the ceiling, and the only objects in the cave were a statue sitting in a prayerful stance and two chests on either side of it. An inscription on the statue read, "His strength persevered through all, his resolve was unwavering, but his faith is what got him through to the end." And each chest had an inscription on it that read, "Leave all with me, with the faith that it will be returned." One by one, the party left all of their belongings in the chests, though Mavis took some time to see if there was any way to keep his gauntlets, unfortunately unable to find one, and the party was teleported to a different portion of the cave containing a long chasm. At the other end of the chasm stood a tunnel leading further into the cave. Gar dropped a stone to test the depth of the chasm, but never heard it collide with anything, and instead took a giant step into the chasm with the faith that he would be okay, and his foot met a magical barrier that held him aloft. One by one, the party followed suit, though Mavis took some convincing, but eventually the party made it through, continuing through the passage. The party was teleported again to a different section of cave containing a narrow hallway with an open door at the end of it. As the party approached it, the majority of the hallway became engulfed in flame, and the light from the flames revealed an inscription on the ground that read, "Walk through the flames. Only the brave and astute may pass." Gar and Zeos were the first to enter the flames as they walked to the opposite side, feeling the searing heat from the flame but continuing bravely toward the open door, and Laren followed closely behind. May waited behind to make sure Mavis was going to make it, and Mavis tested his theory on the astute part of the sentence by running through the flame, and he heard the door slam shut, confirming his theory. Then May and Mavis walked through the flames to the other side, walking through the door. The party now found themselves in a more wide-open cave. At one end was an exit to the cave with light pouring through, and at the other end was a woman chained to the floor of the cave, as the cave suddenly began rumbling and rocks began falling from the ceiling toward the woman. The party quickly rushed to her side, and Mavis began smashing the chains with a loose rock, while Zeos froze the chains to aid, and Gar stood over the party like a shield prepared to brace them from the falling rocks. And though the group made quick progress through the chains, it wasn't fast enough. As rocks began falling overhead and the party braced themselves, but nothing happened. As they opened their eyes, the cave appeared normal, no fallen rocks, and the woman simply stared back at the party with a kind smile on her face as she disappeared into magical essence. Finally, the party left through the open tunnel. The party found themselves once again on top of the spire of rock from their vision, overlooking the seemingly endless layer of clouds, with other spires of rock piercing the cloud layer around them. As they turned around, the party saw the monk they had seen in their vision, who congratulated them on coming as far as they have. The monk introduced himself as Mavoro, and stated that the party has done well, but that there was still a final trial for them: combat with him. Mavoro was unwilling to answer questions until their final trial had passed, but after some convincing, he agreed to answer a single question before the trial. The party eventually agreed to ask what they were chosen for, and Mavoro simply stated that they were chosen to recover the memoriams, leaving the party realizing they probably should have asked a different question. Mavoro explained that the first trial was finding him with nothing but a vision to go on, the second was of faith, the third was of bravery, and the fourth was of compassion, choosing to risk their lives for an innocent even if it meant their demise. Mavoro allowed the party some time to rest before their final trial, a test of their strength, and should the party succeed, they may finally get some answers as to the nature of their quest.